The stranger in the back row. The soft hum of the school auditorium lights filled the empty hall as rows of metal chairs sat cold and waiting. Banners from last year's school musical, Echoes of Rome, still clung to the walls. Faded but proud, the old piano on the stage had seen better days. Its paint chipped, one leg wrapped in duct tape. The music teacher, Miss Laurie, a strict woman with a sharp voice and a perfectionist's eye, checked her clipboard as students trickled into the room, one by one. It was the start of the fall semester's advanced vocal arts program. The class was full of hopefuls, young singers with trembling voices and nervous hearts. They came from different towns, different stories, all chasing the same dream: to sing, to shine, to be heard. Among them, seated quietly in the very last row, wearing a worn hoodie and jeans, was a man far older than the others. His hair was a little messy, dark strands swept back. His eyes were soft but tired, the kind that had seen too much and said too little. Nobody paid much attention to him. Most assumed he was a janitor or perhaps a helper for the school tech crew. After all, what would a man like that be doing in a class like this? But Keanu Reeves sat still, his fingers tapping lightly on his thigh, his eyes watching every student with silent kindness. He hadn't said much since he arrived. In fact, he hadn't said anything at all. He had simply shown up, handed a printed email confirmation of enrollment to the school administrator, and took his seat like everyone else. The staff, confused but polite, didn't question it. The paperwork looked real. And his name, though, familiar, didn't cause a stir. After all, who would expect that Keanu Reeves to be sitting in a public high school's community opera workshop? Miss Laurie, focused on her schedule, hadn't even looked up. She called roll call and asked each student to introduce themselves and share their favorite opera or musical performance. The students offered names like Phantom of the Opera, Carmen, and Les Miserables, their voices filled with excitement. When it was his turn, Keanu stood slowly. A few students turned their heads. His voice was calm, low, and modest. "I'm Keanu. I don't have a favorite opera. I'm just here to learn." A couple of students snickered. One girl in the front whispered, "He looks like that guy from the movies." Her friend rolled her eyes. "Nah, he just wants to look like him." Miss Laurie glanced up, finally noticing the older man. Her brows pinched together. "Sir, you had lost?" Keanu gave a faint smile. "No, ma'am, I signed up. I want to learn." "This is a class for performance-ready students," she said, checking her list again. "People who can handle complex pieces. We're preparing for an advanced opera showcase at the end of the semester. It's not just for fun." "I understand," Keanu said gently. "I'll do my best." The teacher hesitated. She didn't like being rude, but she also didn't like being surprised. "Well," she said, tightening her scarf around her neck, "you can observe for now. We'll see where you fit in later." As the class went on, Keanu remained quiet. He watched as students rehearsed warm-ups and did breathwork exercises. Some students giggled when they missed notes. Others got frustrated and sat down. It was a mix of nerves, pressure, and dreams. One student in particular stood out, a boy named Marcus with a sharp voice and sharper attitude. He had been training for years and wasn't shy about saying it. He eyed Keanu from across the room, sizing him up like a lion watching an old dog. "He's going to hold us back," Marcus muttered under his breath during break. Miss Laurie heard him. "Everyone deserves a chance," she said firmly. But even she couldn't hide her uncertainty. The next day, the real work began. Students were assigned parts from various opera scenes, solos, duets, and ensemble work. It was a challenging selection, filled with powerful arias and difficult vocal transitions. Each student received sheet music and practice guides. Keanu was handed a single sheet of paper without a name or a part. "We're still figuring out where to place you," Miss Laurie said flatly. Keanu nodded. "Thank you." As students began rehearsing their parts, Keanu took a quiet seat near the piano. When no one was looking, he softly hummed along with the melodies, his voice barely audible. But something unusual happened. The janitor, who was sweeping nearby, paused and looked up. His eyes widened just a little. He knew that voice. He had heard it once, years ago, in a hidden clip that floated around the internet, of Keanu Reeves singing a haunting piece during a private charity performance. But that video was removed almost instantly, pulled down before it ever went viral. He stared at Keanu for a moment, then silently walked away, as if holding on to a secret. On the third day, Miss Laurie grew frustrated with one section of a trio piece. The students couldn't match the pitch, they kept missing the harmony, it threw off the timing. She clapped her hands. "Enough!" she barked. "Let me show you how it's supposed to sound." But she wasn't in voice today. Her throat had been acting up, and the music was meant for a male tenor. She turned to the class. "Anyone want to try it? Someone who's confident?" No one raised their hand. Except one. Keanu slowly lifted his hand. His face calm, expression unreadable. Miss Laurie sighed. "Fine, give it a try." Students leaned in, curious. A few rolled their eyes. Marcus smirked. "This should be good." Keanu stood, walked slowly to the center and took the sheet music. He didn't read it. He just closed his eyes. And then, the note came. Not loud, not boastful, but pure. The room froze. The note floated through the air like a whisper made of sunlight. Then came another, then a full phrase. His voice, deep and full of color, filled the room with something unspoken. Students turned in their seats. Phones slowly slid out of pockets. Mouths dropped open. By the time he finished the short verse, the room was silent. No laughter, no whispers, just silence. Then Miss Laurie spoke, her voice soft, almost shaking. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Keanu looked at her and said nothing. He simply sat down. Marcus was staring at him like he had just seen a ghost. The janitor from the corner gave a slow nod, and Miss Laurie looked down at the paper in her hand, suddenly realizing she might have made a terrible mistake, and that was just the beginning. Whispers behind the curtain, words spread like wildfire. By the next class, the energy in the auditorium had completely changed. Students who hadn't even noticed Keanu before were now whispering about him in hushed, curious tones. Some of them had searched online all night, typing things like Keanu Reeves opera singing or Keanu Reeves hidden talent. But nothing showed up. No videos. No articles. It was as if his voice had never existed outside that room. And somehow that made it even more mysterious. Marcus was the most shaken. He had always believed he was the best voice in the room. He had years of training, vocal coaches, expensive private lessons, and yet that one performance, barely 30 seconds, had made him feel invisible. It burned deep inside his pride. He sat quietly, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. During warm-ups, he barely sang. Miss Laurie, on the other hand, had started to look at Keanu differently. She didn't say it out loud, but her voice softened when she spoke to him. She now asked for his input during group harmonies. She even offered him a solo line in one of the ensemble pieces, though she acted like it was a minor part. But Keanu refused. "I'd rather help in the background," he said. "You're too talented to be in the background," she replied. Keanu smiled gently. "So are they just don't know it yet." The students began watching him more closely. They noticed how he helped others during practice, how he stayed after class to move chairs, clean the piano keys, or pick up scattered sheet music. He wasn't loud, but he was present. And the more he gave, the more they noticed. One afternoon, Keanu stayed back to help a girl named Emily. She had a soft soprano voice but struggled with confidence. Every time she reached a high note, her voice cracked. "You're lifting your chin," Keanu said gently. "Keep it relaxed." She blinked. "How do you know that?" "I've cracked on that same note 100 times, he said, smiling. "Relax your shoulders. Take a deep breath before the phrase. It's not just about singing. It's about believing that your voice deserves to be heard." She nodded slowly and tried again. This time her note didn't crack. She looked stunned. "That felt different." "Because you sang it like you meant it," he said, stepping back. Emily walked home that day humming to herself, a little taller than before. But not everyone was happy. That same evening, Marcus stormed into the director's office. His hands were tight fists and his voice carried frustration. "Who is this guy?" he demanded. "He's not a student. He's way older than all of us. Why is he even here?" The director, a tired man with glasses and coffee-stained papers, on his desk looked up. "He applied like everyone else, paid the fee, showed up. But he's not normal, did you hear him?" The director leaned back in his chair. "Yes, I heard him." "So?" Marcus pressed. "So maybe you should be asking yourself why that bothers you so much," the director said calmly. Marcus didn't reply. He just stormed out. The following week, Miss Laurie announced the solo auditions for the opera showcase. Every student would perform one classical piece. It would be their chance to prove themselves, and one student would be chosen to close the performance with the final solo, a legendary piece known for its difficulty and emotional power. The piece was called Notte Perduta, or Lost Night, and few had ever sung it well in public. As names were drawn for the audition order, Miss Laurie paused when she reached Keanu's. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to participate," she said. Keanu shook his head. "I'm just here to support," the class murmured. Some looked disappointed, others relieved. "You should try," Emily said quietly. "You helped me. Now help the audience." Keanu looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with something old and quiet. Then he nodded. "All right. One song." On the day of the auditions, tension hung heavy in the air. Students lined up behind the curtain, each holding their sheet music like armor. Marcus went early. His performance was strong, confident, and technically perfect. His voice soared through the room, and when he finished, he looked straight at Keanu, daring him to follow. When Keanu's turn came, the room quieted. He stepped onto the stage slowly. No sheet music. No fanfare. He stood still for a moment, closed his eyes, and sang. But this time, it was not a short phrase. It was Notte Perduta. The moment he began, something shifted in the room. His voice didn't just reach the back rows. It wrapped around the entire hall like warm silk. It carried sorrow and memory, like a letter from a forgotten past. Every note held weight. Every pause felt like a heartbeat. By the time he reached the final high note, a note known for breaking, even the best voices, Keanu didn't push. He didn't reach. He let go, and the note soared. When he finished, no one clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because they were too stunned to move. Miss Laurie slowly stood from her seat. Her hands trembled slightly. Her eyes shined. "Who are you?" she whispered. Keanu stepped down from the stage and gave a simple reply. "Just someone who used to love singing." Emily wiped a tear. Marcus stared at the floor. After class, Miss Laurie caught up to Keanu outside the auditorium. "You could have taken any stage in the world," she said. "Why come here?" Keanu looked out at the trees swaying in the wind. "Because I wanted to remember what it felt like, to sing without pressure. To sing with people who still have dreams, people who are still finding their voice." She nodded slowly. "You'll take the final solo then?" Keanu hesitated. "If they want me to." The next day, the class voted, and the result was clear. KeanuReeves would close the showcase with Notte Perduta. But the story was only just beginning. Because someone in that auditorium had recorded his audition, and by morning, the video would be everywhere. The voice that shook the world be sunrise. Everything had changed. The video had been posted by a student named Clara. She wasn't trying to cause a storm. She just wanted to remember the way Keanu's voice made her feel, like the world had paused to listen. She titled the video, "Mystery Man Sings Opera Like a Legend at Local School." It had no hashtags, no promotion, but it didn't need any. The comments came fast. This gave me goosebumps. Who is this man? Why does he sound like heartbreak, wrapped in silk? By noon, it had already reached 1 million views. By evening, it was on national news. Reporters, vocal coaches, producers, even former opera stars were all asking the same question. How could a man like that go unnoticed? A few people began to piece the clues together. His face was familiar. Too familiar. Someone compared a frame from the video to a red carpet photo of Keanu Reeves from years ago. The bone structure, the jawline, the eyes. It was him, but it couldn't be, right? Others laughed it off. Why would Keanu Reeves be in a high school opera class? But the truth had already taken root. At the school, everything exploded overnight. Students arrived the next morning to a parking lot filled with news vans, flashing cameras, and reporters with wide eyes and eager microphones. Teachers stood by the doors trying to hold them back. Security guards tried to keep order. It felt like the world had broken through the walls of their quiet little school. Inside, the students gathered in the auditorium, waiting. Keanu didn't show. Miss Laurie paced near the piano, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Has anyone seen him?" she asked. The students shook their heads. Emily looked worried. Marcus sat with his arms crossed, eyes blank. Suddenly, the side door opened. Keanu walked in quietly, dressed the same as always. Hoodie, jeans, soft steps. He didn't look surprised by the noise outside. He didn't even glance toward the windows. He just walked to his usual seat in the back row. "They're here because of you," Miss Laurie said softly, approaching him. Keanu gave a small shrug. "I didn't ask for it." "Why didn't you tell us who you really are?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and awe. "I'm not who they think I am," he said. "Not anymore." She looked at him, searching his eyes. "But you were." He nodded slowly. "A long time ago." The students gathered around, listening. Keanu stood up and faced them all. "Years ago, before the movies, before the fame, I trained in opera. It was my first love. I studied in secret. I sang for small groups, never big crowds. I never recorded an album. I just sang. For myself." "Why did you stop?" Emily asked gently. Keanu's gaze drifted to the window, to the noise outside. "Because somewhere along the way I forgot why I started. I let pressure take the place of passion. I lost something. And then I stopped singing altogether." The room was silent. "Until now," he added. Clara, the student who uploaded the video, stepped forward. Her voice was shaky. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Keanu stopped her with a kind smile. "You helped more than you know." Miss Laurie cleared her throat. "They want you to perform. Live, on stage, at the City Opera Hall, a full audience, television coverage, everything." Keanu looked at her. "I already have a stage," he said, motioning to the worn piano and the scratched floor beneath them. "But this is your chance," she insisted. "People around the world want to hear you." He was quiet for a long moment. "What about the showcase?" he asked. "We'll still do it," she said. "But it won't be the same without you." Keanu looked at the students, at Emily, Clara, even Marcus. They weren't just classmates anymore. They were voices still finding their shape. People learning how to be brave. "Then let's make it count," he said. "Not for them, not for the cameras, for us." They all nodded. The next 2 weeks were unlike anything the school had seen before. Reporters still lingered outside. Camera drones flew over the auditorium. But inside, the group trained harder than ever. Keanu helped Marcus with phrasing. Marcus, once cold and distant, began asking questions instead of making comments. He still carried pride, but something inside him had shifted. He saw that Keanu wasn't there to compete. He was there to lift. Emily bloomed. Her voice grew stronger, clearer. Under Keanu's quiet encouragement, she took on a duet she once feared. When she hit the high note during rehearsal, the room clapped. She covered her mouth, stunned. It was the first time she truly believed she was good enough. "Missy," Laurie watched from the side, tears behind her glasses. She had spent decades teaching, but this was different. This was magic. The day of the showcase finally arrived. The school gym was transformed into a performance hall. Velvet curtains were hung. Lights borrowed from local theaters were rigged into the rafters. Parents, teachers, friends, and even strangers filled the seats. The air was electric with expectation. Backstage, the students warmed up. Nervous laughs, deep breaths, last-minute tuning. Keanu stood to the side, calm. As ever, Marcus walked up to him. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked. Keanu looked at him with a half-smile. "Are you?" They both laughed quietly. Then Miss Laurie entered. "You close the show," she told Keanu. "But first we give them us." And that's what they did. Every student performed, their piece with heart. Even the quietest ones shined. The audience clapped, cried, and cheered. No one held back. Finally, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room. The announcer's voice came through the speakers. And now, our final performer. Keanu walked onto the stage alone. No microphone, no spotlight. Just him. He looked out at the sea of faces. He could see Miss Laurie in the wings, Emily near the curtain, Marcus nodding at him. He closed his eyes and began to sing. But this time, something was different. The voice that came out wasn't just beautiful. It was honest. It was raw. It was everything he had ever felt but never said. People wept. Phones dropped from hands. In that moment, there were no cameras, no fame, no titles, just a man, rediscovering his voice. When he finished, the room didn't cheer right away. They just stood, silent, overwhelmed. And then, like a wave, it came. Thunderous applause, a standing ovation. Some clapped through tears, others just held their breath. Keanu bowed gently. He didn't smile wide. He didn't need to. He had found what he came for, and he gave it away freely. Backstage, Miss Laurie hugged him, something she had never done to a student before. "You changed them," she said. Keanu shook his head. "They changed me." Emily ran up and hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus followed and extended a hand. "You made me want to listen," he said. Keanu shook his hand firmly. The video from that night went viral too. But this time, Keanu didn't disappear. He didn't run from the spotlight. He stayed. And what he did next would surprise everyone. The promise he made. When the last curtain fell and the applause finally faded, many believed Keanu Reeves would vanish once again, like a quiet breeze that came and went without warning. They thought he had come to sing one last time, to heal a wound in his soul and leave. But that night something shifted, not just in him but in the people around him. The following morning he was back at the school, not as a guest, not as a celebrity, as a student. The hallway chatter stopped as he passed. Some students waved, unsure if they should say something. Others whispered from behind lockers. But Keanu didn't carry himself like a star. He walked with calm, with humility, like he belonged there, not because of fame, but because he had chosen to belong. Miss Laurie called him into her office. She looked tired but happy. Her desk, normally filled with papers and lesson plans, now held letters, thank you notes, performance invitations, media requests. They want you in Rome, Paris, Vienna, the world's biggest stages, she said, sliding a few envelopes toward him. Keanu looked at them quietly. Then he set them aside. "I'm not going," he said. She blinked. "But why?" He leaned forward. "Because when I came here, I wasn't looking for the world. I was looking for my voice, and I found it, not alone, but with them." Miss Laurie sat back in her chair. "And what will you do now?" He smiled. "I made a promise." A week later, the students returned to class to find a surprise taped to the door. Advanced opera workshop, new co-instructor, KeanuReeves. The room erupted. Emily squealed with joy. Marcus stared at the sign like it was magic. Clara took a picture to send to her mother. Some students didn't believe it until he walked in carrying a stack of books, a keyboard under one arm. "I'll still be learning," he said. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to help teach too." They clapped so loudly even the janitor poked his head in and smiled. From that moment on, everything changed. Keanu wasn't just a guest voice anymore. He was part of the fabric of the school. He showed up early, stayed late, helped with harmonies, coached solos, sat with shy students until they found the courage to sing a single note. He never raised his voice, never tried to take over. He just gave. And slowly, the class began to grow in ways no one expected. Students who once feared the stage started to lead. Emily performed her first solo at a local festival. She dedicated it to the man who reminded me that my voice mattered. Marcus, once closed off, now mentored younger students. He even invited Keanu to meet his mother, who had never seen him perform before. One day after class, Miss Laurie found Keanu sitting alone, staring at an old music sheet from decades ago. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He looked up, his eyes soft. "My mother used to sing," he said. "Not on stage, just around the house. When I was little, I'd sit near the kitchen door and listen. She had this way of turning ordinary moments into music. I think I lost that for a while. But here, I feel like I hear her again." Miss Laurie didn't speak. She just nodded. "Do you think we could do something more?" he asked. "Like, what?" He looked out at the empty chairs in the auditorium. "Build something, not just for this school but for kids like these. Everywhere." She leaned in. "You mean a program?" "I mean a stage, open to anyone. A place where voices aren't judged by how perfect they sound but how true they are." Her eyes lit up. Within a month, Keanu had donated quietly to start the foundation. No press, no public announcement. He didn't even put his name on it. He called it the Quiet Voice Initiative. The school gave up the old gym storage room. Keanu worked with volunteers to transform it into a rehearsal studio. Padded walls, new instruments, soft lighting. The students helped paint the walls, each leaving their handprint near the doorway. Soon, kids from other schools began to visit. Some had stage fright, some were on the edge of giving up music completely. But one by one, they found something inside those walls. They found the freedom to sing without fear. Emily started helping with younger girls who had been told their voices were too soft. Marcus taught breath control to boys who struggled to reach notes. Keanu watched it all, sometimes with a hand on his chest, feeling something stir deep within. But not everyone was happy. A local arts critic, famous for his strict opinions and cold reviews, published an article titled, "Keanu Reeves, actor turned opera teacher. Should we really be clapping?" He mocked the idea of someone without official conservatory credentials leading young voices. He called it a publicity stunt. He said fame doesn't make someone a teacher. The article spread quickly, and just like that, doubt crept back in. The schools board started getting calls. Some parents questioned the curriculum. The district scheduled a review. Miss Laurie was furious. After all he's done, this is how they treat him? Keanu stayed calm. "I'm not here for approval," he said. "I'm here for the music." But the students weren't quiet. They started a petition, then a video montage. Clara edited together clips of their journey, from Emily's first cracked note to the packed auditorium standing for Keanu. She added music, quotes from students, and a message at the end. "This isn't about fame. It's about finding our voice." The video exploded, again, and this time, even the critic had to respond. He showed up unannounced to one of the open studio days. He sat in the back row, arms crossed. And he watched. He watched as a boy with a speech disorder sang clearly for the first time. He watched Emily encourage a girl who had never sung in public, and he watched Keanu kneel beside a child, adjusting his hand placement on a keyboard with patience and grace. At the end, the critic stood and clapped, once, twice. Then the whole room followed. Afterward, he approached Keanu. "I was wrong," he said. Keanu simply nodded. "You're not just teaching them music," the critic added. "You're teaching them how to be." And with that, he walked out. That night, Miss Laurie found Keanu alone in the studio, looking out the window as snowflakes drifted across the sky. "You never told me what that opera piece meant," she said softly. "Notte perduta." He smiled gently. "It means lost night," he said. "But the last line is about dawn. Do you remember it?" He nodded. "I sing it to myself sometimes, when I need to remember that light always returns." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "I think your dawn has come, Keanu." He looked at the empty chairs, the quiet instruments, the echoes of laughter and song that still lived in the walls. And then, he whispered, not just mine. When silence became a song, the following month brought something no one expected. An invitation. Not just any invitation, but a formal request from the Royal Conservatory of Music in Vienna, asking Keanu Reeves to perform at their annual gala, a night reserved only for the greatest living voices in classical music. It wasn't for film stars. It wasn't for publicity. It was because someone had watched the Quiet Voice Initiative video and heard something rare. Authenticity wrapped in raw talent. Word had spread across opera circles. They hadn't just heard a man who could sing. They had heard a man who felt every note. Miss Laurie placed the letter in front of Keanu on a rainy afternoon. He picked it up slowly, letting the thick paper sit in his hands like it carried a world. Too heavy to lift. They want you, she whispered. The world wants you again. He didn't answer. He just looked out the window, where rain dripped down the glass like teardrops tracing a quiet memory. What are you thinking? She asked softly. That I don't want to leave them, he said. You don't have to, she said. But maybe, just this once, they should hear you too. The students gathered in the auditorium later that day, waiting. There was a tension in the room, part excitement, part fear. They had heard rumors about Vienna, about the royal invitation. No one said it out loud, but they all wondered the same thing. Would he leave? When Keanu walked in, they sat up straighter. Even Marcus, who usually slouched in the back, leaned forward. Keanu stood center stage. I got an offer, he said. Nobody spoke. They want me to sing at a place I once only dreamed about, a place I thought I'd never be good enough for. The students exchanged glances. I'm not taking it, he said. Gasps followed. Emily's eyes widened. Clara mouthed, What? Not unless we all go. The room froze. I talked to the conservatory, Keanu continued, and told them I wouldn't come unless they let me bring my class, not to sing backup, not to sit in, the crowd, to perform. Marcus spoke first, voice shaky. They said yes? Keanu smiled. They said they've never done anything like that before. But? Emily asked. But they said yes. The room erupted. Laughter, clapping, tears. Some students hugged each other. Others simply stared in awe. We leave in 4 weeks, Keanu said. If you want to come. Marcus stood. I'm in. Emily raised her hand. Me too. One by one, they all agreed, and so began the most intense, emotional, and beautiful month of their lives. Every day after school, the students rehearsed. Keanu brought in professional vocal coaches from his past, quiet people with deep eyes and stronger ears. Miss Laurie managed the schedule, moving between piano chords and stage blocking. Parents signed permission slips. Local businesses donated travel bags and warm coats. The community rallied behind them. Even the critic who once doubted Keanu wrote a full column titled, When the World Hears Them, We'll All Remember This Classroom. During one evening rehearsal, Emily pulled Keanu aside. I'm scared, she said. Of singing? He asked. Of being heard, she said. What if I mess up in front of all those people? Keanu knelt down so they were eye to eye. Your voice, he said slowly, was never meant to impress them. It was meant to reach someone out there who needs it. Even if it's just one person. Even if that person is you. She nodded. Her eyes wet. Marcus later confessed to Keanu, When I first saw you, I thought you were here to steal the spotlight. But now, I think you helped me find mine. Keanu smiled gently. You've had it the whole time. The trip to Vienna was surreal. For many of the students, it was their first time leaving the country. The plane ride felt like a dream. When they landed, reporters waited with cameras, but Keanu kept the students close, always shielding them. Remember, he said, we're not here for fame. We're here to tell a story, with music. The Royal Conservatory was even more magnificent than they had imagined. Golden arches, marble floors, a grand chandelier that hung like a crown of stars. There, voices echoed in the rehearsal hall like whispers in a cathedral. On the day of the gala, they dressed in simple black. No glitter, no showmanship, just unity. Keanu didn't take center stage that night. He stood behind them. Emily stepped forward for her solo. Marcus followed with a piece written for tenor and cello. Then Clara, then the rest. And when they finally reached the end, when the last harmony of their final ensemble piece filled the air, the room held its breath. Keanu stepped forward only for one thing: to sing the last line of Notte Perduta. This time he didn't sing it alone. The whole class sang it with him. In silence, I was lost. But in song, I came home. The audience rose in silence. No shouts, no clapping, just reverence. And then, wave after wave, came the applause. Not the kind you hear at concerts, but the kind that shakes people awake. It was standing ovation after standing ovation. Backstage, the students hugged, cried, laughed. "We did it," Emily whispered. Marcus wiped his eyes. "We really did." Keanu stood in the corner, hand over, his chest. Miss Laurie approached. "How does it feel?" He looked at her, his eyes full of something deeper than joy. "Like my mother's song never stopped," he said. The conservatory director later told Keanu, "What you've done is more than music. You've awakened something in these children that no school, no conservatory, no technique could ever teach. You reminded them why music exists." Keanu bowed slightly. "Thank you." He then returned to his students, walking between them like a friend, not a star. As they flew home, the sun rose above the clouds, casting golden light across their quiet plane cabin. Most of the students had fallen asleep, their dreams filled with melodies. Keanu sat by the window. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook, old and weathered. On the front was written one simple sentence in faded ink: "Sing only when it means something." He closed his eyes. He had echoes that never fade. 2 months after the Vienna performance, something strange began to happen. Letters started pouring in, not just from fans, but from students, parents, teachers, even strangers from tiny villages and distant cities. People who had never cared about opera were writing to say one thing: "Thank you for showing us that every voice matters." The Quiet Voice Initiative, once a small local effort, became something much bigger. Dozens of schools across the country asked how they could start similar programs. Some didn't even have music teachers anymore. Others had kids who had never been given a real stage. They all wanted one thing: a safe place for voices that had been ignored too long. Keanu didn't try to build it alone. He brought in others: former singers, retired conductors, shy composers who had walked away from the industry, and slowly, city by city, state by state, the Quiet Voice Initiative became a movement. But Keanu didn't stop teaching. He still walked into that old school auditorium each week. He still wore the same hoodie. He still sat in the back row some days just listening. One Thursday afternoon, while the class was rehearsing a new ensemble piece, Emily entered with a thick folder. "What's that?" Marcus asked. "A letter," she said, smiling. "From the State Education Department." Everyone gathered around as Miss Laurie read aloud. It was official. The Quiet Voice Initiative had been granted national education funding. It would now be introduced into public schools across the country as an elective: emotional performance arts, built around kindness, teamwork, storytelling, and truth through music. There were cheers, hugs. Even Miss Laurie wiped away a tear. Keanu stood silently near the piano, letting them celebrate. Marcus turned to him. "You started this. What are you thinking right now?" Keanu looked at them all. The students who once doubted themselves, who now stood tall and proud. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "this is what music was always meant to do." The very next day, the school held a surprise assembly. The auditorium was packed. Not just with students and teachers, but with parents, officials, even news crews. The air buzzed with anticipation. The principal walked up to the stage with a golden folder and a small wooden box. "We are here to honor someone who reminded us that greatness isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about lifting others up even when no one is watching." He opened the box. Inside was a small crystal sculpture, a music note wrapped around a rising flame. "The Flame Award," he said, "for igniting voices around the world." As applause echoed through the hall, he called out, "Keanu Reeves." The students rose as one. Every person stood and clapped. Some cried, and Keanu, as always, walked slowly to the stage, humbled and quiet. He took the award gently, nodded, and waited for the applause to fade before he spoke. "I used to think my voice didn't matter anymore," he said. "I thought I had given everything I could. But then I met all of you, and you reminded me that music isn't about reaching millions. It's about reaching just one person and helping them believe in themselves." He looked toward Emily, who was already in tears. Toward Marcus, who stood proudly with his arms crossed but eyes soft. Toward Miss Laurie, whose hands were pressed to her heart. "This award isn't mine," Keanu said. "It belongs to every quiet voice that never gave up." Later that night, the students and staff gathered in the old studio one more time. There were no cameras, no microphones, just a circle of chairs. Keanu lit a small candle and placed it on the piano. "For voices we've found," he said, "and for the ones still waiting to be heard." Emily sang first, a soft lullaby she wrote herself. Marcus followed with a haunting solo that left the room breathless. Clara read a poem. Each student shared something, not to impress, but to be seen. And finally, Keanu stepped forward. He sang a song none of them had heard before. It was quiet, slow, written in a language of memory and forgiveness. The notes weren't perfect. The pitch wavered at times, but no one cared, because it was real. When he finished, there was silence. Then Emily whispered, "Will you keep singing?" Keanu looked at her, then at the others. "Only if you do too." In the years that followed, the Quiet Voice Initiative became a cornerstone in arts education. Schools that once silenced music halls now rang with young voices. Some students went on to perform on stages around the world. Others never left their small towns, but carried confidence and kindness into every part of life. As for Keanu, he never stopped teaching. He never stopped learning either. He released no albums, accepted no movie roles during those years. He simply chose a different kind of spotlight, one that didn't shine on him, but through him. He believed the world didn't need more stars. It needed more teachers, more listeners, more quiet voices, brave enough to sing. One evening, many years later, a new student walked into that same school auditorium. She was nervous, small, carrying a tattered notebook filled with lyrics she had never dared to share. And sitting in the back row, just like always, was a man with gentle eyes and graying hair. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Welcome. Let's hear your voice." And just like that, her life changed, because someone believed in her before she believed in herself. And that's how it always began.